Jai Baba. My name is Ward Parks, and this is the story of how I came to Baba. I came to Baba all at once when I was 18, young, but the whole story, I'll give the whole complete story. It begins before that. When I came to Baba, even though I was just a kid, it somehow felt like I've been searching forever and forever and forever. That's how it is when you're that age. But I was, when I was 13, I was living with my parents, of course, in Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island. And one day, it was evening and getting dark, and I was playing with a soccer ball in the front yard all alone. And my family, I had no religion of any kind. Nothing was there. My dad was a scientist, and kind of secular atheist background was the world for me, and I'd never thought about these things, but the only religion we had was politics. And so, without going into specifics, my family was fervently on the side of one political party, and so I assumed I was too. But I was playing, and suddenly the thought came to me, well, maybe I'm not a member of this party, maybe I'm a member of the other party. And it's not like I was thinking about any of the issues in particular. I didn't understand them or care about them, but it was a jolt, like maybe something I've always thought that I was, maybe I'm not that. And I got a big shock, and then over the next, I was always, a good student and would think about these. So I was thinking, how do I know anything? All the things that people tell me, why should I believe them? For example, the Earth rotates around the sun and the Earth spins and so forth. Well, I don't know that. And it's not that I really doubted it, but I was thinking, how do I know anything at all? Even if I see something right in front of me, how do I know that that's really there? And why should I believe anything that anybody tells me? When you're that age, it's sort of quick to doubt everybody. And so, but very quickly I started to get to what I thought were the most important questions. Like, I was supposed to be a good boy and work hard in school and get a good job and live a good life, and then everybody would remember me after I died. Well, okay, and so I thought, well, what's the reason for doing that? But then I'll die, and after 100 years, nobody will remember me, or if after 100 years somebody does, well, after 200 years they won't. So what would be the reason to do anything? And it seemed obvious, well, there's the problem of death, everybody dies, and the only answer to that would be if God exists. And somehow or another in the world that I grew up in, I had never had any religion, and I never met anybody to whom it seemed to be anything. So I had absorbed the idea that God is stupid. Only dumb people believe in God, mindless, stupid. So I just said, God doesn't exist. Even though I should have given it a try, since everything hinged on that. But I said, so, all right, God doesn't exist. So what that means is that everything is meaningless. And there is no solution to the problem of death. And I would really brood on this a lot. Like let's suppose I'm lying in bed and I would have to get up and go to school, okay? And to do it, I would have to throw the blankets off of me and get up. So let's take the best possible case scenario. I get up and I go to school, and everybody loves and admires me, and I do a blazingly good job, and the best student that ever there was, and I become one of the most famous people who ever lived, and admired by absolute, and then I die. And after a while, I'll be forgotten, and it was worth nothing. That's the best case scenario, but the likelihood is that it won't work out that well. Maybe everybody will hate me, so why should I even get out of bed, you know? And I would, you know, think about this a lot. Think like walking across a dark field at night, and you've got a little candle in your hand, and you're trying to keep the wind from blowing it out, and the rain from putting it out, and eventually the candle goes out, finished. That's what life is. And it's inherently worthless, and there's no reason to do anything. So all this that I was getting told about how I should be good, well, why should I be good, you know? I mean, there's no doubt that if people are good, you know, people are happier. But why does that matter? Like, let's suppose I had a single button and I could push it and the whole world would be blown up and everyone would die, okay? Well, if I felt like doing it, I should do it. And okay, so it would be ruination for everybody and disaster for everybody, but they're as worthless as I am. Nothing has any value. So I should just go ahead and do it. Or if I saw someone walking ahead of me and I knew they had a whole bunch of money and I wanted the money, well, I should just go up and kill them and take their money. And if everyone lived like that, it would be hell for everybody, no doubt about it. But so what? It's all worthless. And if they wanted to do that to me, they should do that to me. Of course, I would fight it off, but life is completely, I didn't know the word then, but I was become a nihilist, a philosophical nihilist. And I was just a kid, but I was thinking, brooding all these revolutions in my head, and never said anything to anybody, but it got to me, you know. I would really think, I was the sort who, I thought about these things really a lot, and I felt like everything was closing in on me, and everything was getting more and more bleak and more desperate, you know, like the hopelessness and emptiness and worthlessness of everything. And meanwhile, I was just going to school, and I was always a good student. I was like, you know, I was in one of these high-pressured prep schools, and I was one of the best students in my class. But inwardly, I was thinking this way. And I began to think, well, what's the point of living at all? I should just commit suicide. And I started to have thoughts. I was up on the third floor of one of these old houses, and I should just jump out the window and die. And I really became a very desperate place. And when I remember I was 16 one night, and I was thinking about all this, and I just thought, I can't go on like this. Life is not worth living this way. There's no point in thinking anymore about the meaning of life, because there isn't one. Nothing can answer death. And I would say, people, you know, always say, well, make the world better, but there has to be something of real value to make that worth something, and nothing has value because everything dies. And everybody is a liar about this. When you're 16, you're prepared to dismiss everybody pretty quickly, not realizing I wasn't the first person in the world ever to have had these thoughts, but it seemed to me that I was. So I said, okay, no point in thinking about any of this anymore. It's a bad lost cause, and that's how it is. But I have to find some way of being less miserable. And I don't want to just find some situation that makes me feel better. No, I have to find some way where life would be worth living, where the balance sheet was more happiness than misery. And I said, I'll give myself 2 years to find something. And in 2 years, if I haven't found anything, I'll kill myself. I remember a night I decided that. And very soon after that, within a week, I had a friend, and we would talk about these things. And one night we were talking, and he said, This is the 60s, maybe 67 or 68, something like that. And I was 16 years old, and he said, oh, there are these people, the Zen Buddhists, and nothing ever affects them. It was kind of a 16-year-old boy's version of who Zen Buddhists were. They kind of thumb their nose at the world. Nothing affects them, and whatever happens, they laugh at it. And so I don't know why on earth I believed it, but I thought, well, if there are people who are like this, this must be a possibility in life that I hadn't known about. And my friend said, yeah, that's true. So I went down to the bookstore. I was in right near Brown University, and they had these really good bookstores. So I bought a couple books on Zen Buddhism, and I liked them. I definitely liked them, but there was a lot about, well, Zen Buddhism is different from Amida Buddhism, which is different from Theravada Buddhism, blah, 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 blah. And Buddhism is not for callow young Westerners looking for the meaning of life or having given up on, which is basically me. So it was a little bit, so I thought, okay, well, whoever these Zen Buddhists are, they must have learned it from Buddha, right? I don't know why I thought, but you have to go back to the source, so okay. So I went down to the bookstore and I bought a book on the Buddha, and I was blown away. Jesus had never been in my life at all, but I had never encountered anyone like that. It was utterly convincing and really moving. I mean, the stories of his life and how he dealt with people, and somehow all these images of India, and they have these statues of him, and I had never encountered anything like that in my whole life. I never imagined that such a person could be. And one of his basic doctrines was the Four Noble Truths. And the first noble truth is that life is suffering. And man, he had called that one right. It's like, it's not that your people are miserable all the time, but that life is fundamentally unsatisfying. And I thought, yes, this man is telling the truth. And the second noble truth blew my mind away. He said, there's a cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is desire. And I had never thought, and it's obviously true, if you never desired anything, you would never suffer. And it was just astonishing. It was so obvious and so obviously true. And then the third and fourth noble truths. But anyway, everything changed for me. My parents didn't know what the hell was up with me, and I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. But I was reading all these books of Buddha, and then suddenly one day the idea hit me, like, well, I shouldn't just be thinking about these things, I should do it. I should seek nirvana and attain nirvana. That's what his last words were, seek out your salvation with diligence. But when it came to that, I was kind of scared of it, because I actually didn't know a thing about Buddhism. I was so callow, but I thought I would just have to renounce the world and go out and beg and try to seek nirvana. And up in Rhode Island, you'd freeze in the winter time, and I suppose I could have become a Buddhist beggar in Florida, but somehow that would be cheating, right? So I just wasn't sure I had what it would take to do it. So, but then what was I going to do? Not do it? So I said, okay, I'll give myself 2 years. I gave another 2 years, and I'll train and get ready. And just at that time also, I got into Harvard University, which was a big deal in my family, and I became the best student in the class in this high-pressured school. So everybody was, I was admiring me, and I was getting praise from everyone. But in myself, I was thinking, I'm just going to leave everything and become a beggar. But I wasn't going to tell my parents that. But I said, okay, I'll wait. Then I got into Harvard, and I said, okay, I'll go to 1 year to please my parents, and then I'll break the bad news to them about my career choice and become a beggar and just wander off and seek nirvana. And if I die, I die. Okay, so and everything had changed. I had all these desperate thoughts about committing suicide, and all of that was gone. And I'd have these pictures of Buddha and what he looked like, and my idea of India. And then my high school year came to an end, and again, my parents could not figure out what was going on with me because I would never talk about it. So they dragged me. I had some surgery, as it turned out, so it was kind of uncomfortable. And they dragged me on this big driving trip across America to the West Coast. And I didn't want to go at all, but I wound up really falling in love with the landscape of the west of America, the mountains and the plains. And since I was going to become a Buddhist beggar, I mean, I really didn't know anything about it. I was still an atheist. You know, Buddha never talked about God. So I would do a meditation at night, and I didn't even know you needed actually to get some training or learn something about it. But so I would just go off into the woods and I would sit. I'd try to sit in the lotus position. I don't know if you know, in a certain way. And it was agony. And I couldn't stay in it for more. And I was thinking, well, if I'm going to try to get nirvana and I can't even stay in the lotus position for 5 minutes, that's not very promising. But I would do my best. But I did a meditation, and actually it was a very good meditation. It just sort of, nobody taught me to, but I was sitting there and I would imagine that the Buddha was about 5 feet away from me, and I would look at him, and he would look at me, and that was my meditation. It's actually a very good meditation. And so when we were traveling and driving during the day, I started to have this kind of experience where, I don't know, maybe you've had this experience when you're with a group of people, say, and suddenly I'll have the feeling that almost like somebody's touching my face or something, and I'll look, and somebody's looking at me, and you realize they're really looking intensively, and you both look away, and it's sort of embarrassing, like that. I would have that feeling that somebody was looking at me, and well, who is that? And suddenly I would remember the Buddha, and I would see his face, and it was like he was looking at me. And yeah, I had never in my life had that. It was the strangest feeling in the whole world. I never in my life had a feeling like that. And I sort of felt like he really was looking at me. And I was an atheist, and I had no way of understanding what was going on. And Buddha was dead, but I had read, after Buddha's death, his close disciple Anand, who is like Erich has that role, or Peter, had said, well, if you pray to Buddha and if you love Buddha, he will hear you and respond to you. And the book I read said, well, Anand loved Buddha. He didn't really understand him properly. Buddha was gone. He was in nirvana. And so I thought, yeah, that's right, Buddha. Anand didn't understand who Buddha was. But I was having this thing happening, and then the thought came to me, well, who knew Buddha better? The scholar who wrote this book, or Anand, Well, obviously Anand. And, well, let's suppose all of this is real. There really is such a thing as nirvana, and it really is beyond time and space. What would that look like to someone like me? Well, it would look like someone here, now, looking at me. That may not be the reality of it, but that's how it would appear to someone like me. So maybe Buddha really is here. Maybe all of this is true, and it's not just a bunch of mental games. And that made a real you know, it really affected me quite a lot. So then this trip ended, and I started going to college, and I was having my 1 year before I became a beggar. So I was fasting and doing all this preparation so that, you know, I hadn't told my parents anything, but I was going to leave school and all that. And then it was November 22nd, 1970, and it turns out that was the anniversary of Baba's visit to Boston. And I was in school in Cambridge, in the Boston area. And I had just, with my friend had been to Harvard Square and had just bought a Rolling Stone magazine, you know, the rock and roll magazine, and I had it under my arm. I hadn't looked at it yet. And we were walking back into my dormitory room, and down at the basement there was a bulletin, ground floor, there was a bulletin board. And my friend said, "Oh, that's Meher Baba. He says he's the Buddha." And I went, boing, because I had read that Buddha said he would come back as the Maitreya Buddha. And I had been thinking, this is the sort of time that that would happen. So I was kind of looking for something, so I went right and I took a look at the photo, and it was a 1967 passport photo of Baba, just this part of his face. And I was somehow expecting someone very young. I had the idea if the Buddha never suffered, he would not have any wrinkles on his face. You know, have all these stupid ideas and when you're, you know, a kid. And it wasn't like that, but I really thought he has obviously suffered. I could see it in his face, but he has suffered from love for others, not for himself. And that wasn't exactly the picture I had imagined, but it made but it was for a lecture that night, and it was Alan Cohen. You know, Alan Cohen is, he's a Baba lover to this day, well known, and he had been a student at Harvard, a doctoral student a few years before that, studying with Timothy Leary, who was the great drug guru, and Richard Alpert, who was a colleague of his. And so they had all been in the original experiment, LSD experimentation. And I had never taken LSD, because even when life was meaningless and I was about to commit my suicide if I didn't blow the world up by pushing a button, still, I hadn't taken LSD because I heard it might be bad for my health. But finally, I had decided, okay, I'll do it now. So I was probably going to do it that weekend. So it was right on my mind then. And the lecture title was LSD, Consciousness, and Meher Baba, something like that. So, man, I was right there for that one. A lecture by Alan Cohen. And it was going to start in 2 hours. So, of course, I had to find out, was this really the Buddha? And so I went up to my room, and, you know, we were going to eat dinner and go to the lecture. And I opened the Rolling Stone magazine, and the cover story was about Baba, by Peter Townsend, you know, the rock and roll superstar. And I forget the title of it, but the whole cover was a picture, Meher Baba. So, of course, I read it, and with greatest interest. And Peter Townsend quotes from Baba's message, the highest of the high. And there's something, I am not a pir or a wali or a mahapurush or this or that. And then, I am the ancient one, the highest of the high. And when I read that, it was like someone rang a bell in me that I hadn't even known was there. And I said, this is the voice of the Buddha. And I didn't even think that thought, but it was just absolutely clear. So I went to the talk that night, and it was a huge Harvard lecture hall. There must have been, I don't know, 1,000 people there. It was mobbed. I was up on a balcony, and Alan Cohen is, of course, had been a Harvard doctoral candidate, and he's really good at talking to groups like that. And so he was talking about, his background with LSD and his contacts with Meher Baba, et cetera, and he said that Meher Baba said that he was God in human form. And that was quite a jolt for me, because I had been atheist, right? And I just felt anything Meher Baba says is true. And if he says he's God, well, I guess God exists. So that old question was just completely answered right then and there. And then at the end of the lecture, I just wanted more, So I went down to the front, and there were these Harvard egghead types asking all these, well, if Meher Baba never took LSD, how did he know that it was harmful? And, Alan would say, well, the real question was he God in human form? Because if he was God, he would know. Alan is very good with straight answer. And finally, everybody had asked their questions, and I was the last one, and Alan sort of looked at me, and I didn't even have any questions. I just wanted more. And I was trying to think, at Harvard, you're taught to question everything, and particularly things like this. And I just wanted to ask a question. I couldn't think of ones. I could have said, do you have a mailing list? Or are there meetings? Or I was just stunned, and so I just got embarrassed and went back to my room. And when I got back to my room, there was this kind of meditation I'd been doing, and I didn't do it, but I sat in the corner and I lit this candle, and I just knew that I was born to follow Meher Baba, and what I had been looking for, I had found, and that would be it for the rest of my life. And, I'd been very, as the story shows, very kind of intellectual with philosophy. I didn't mention, but I've been reading existentialism and Sartre and Camus and all these sorts of people, and all these doubts and stuff. And this was a moment of complete clarity and complete certainty, and I was just absolutely sure. And I will say that from that day until this one, that has never changed. I feel as certain now as I did that first moment. So that's my story of how I came to Baba. Jai Baba.